Hi, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. Well, I shot a video last week, shortly after President Trump came out with his directive to study the situation regarding our susceptibility to EMP attack. A lot of other people have done it. So I shot it last week, and after it had been up for a couple of days, I went on and saw that something seemed different with my channel and realized that it was nowhere to be found, that it had disappeared. So I'm too new to YouTube to know why that would happen. I don't think I offended anybody, and I don't think I gave away any secrets. So I'm not sure what happened, but this is kind of an important issue. So I thought I'd shoot it again. A lot of the other channels have come out and talked about this, and this happens every few years. A new report comes out. It's nothing new. Ever since the 2001 EMP Commission report came out, people have been becoming a little bit more aware of it gradually. But as I watch and listen, I'm a little bit surprised at the fact that it still seems new to quite a few people, even amongst the preparedness circles. And so I thought that I would kind of address, as they say, since I wrote the books, and I did. That's exactly what this is about. The first book, The Reversion. The second book, The Revival. It is about a grid down situation. I won't give away the entire plot of it, but it's about life after EMP or CME, and you'll have to read the books to find out which that was. So since I did that, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions, some of the misinformation that some people might have about exactly what would happen and what would life be like after an EMP or a CME. So to kind of give it some background, and some other people have done this to different degrees of, different degrees. The first that we kind of knew about this was from the Carrington event in 1859. There was an amateur British astronomer named Richard Carrington that noticed some unusual activity on the sun, and he had a pretty good idea that it was going to affect us. And when it did, he documented it, and it was after him that it was named the Carrington event. Now, at that time in 1859, there was very little electric around, and pretty much the only thing that it affected was the telegraph. But that was really the kind of the first information that we as humans had about this phenomenon. There had been other situations since then. If you want to go back and through the years, Starfish Prime was another incident from which we learned a little bit about the effects of EMP, and you can Google that and all that. The EMP Commission report came out in 2001. That gave us still more information. And then in 2012, probably, and these are kind of the big touchstones, the U.S. Geological Survey came out and estimated that there was a 12% chance of a Carrington-class CME occurring or striking the Earth in the decade following 2012. Now, why is that important? We need to understand exactly what EMP and CME is. Pretty much everybody's got the basics on EMP. It'll take out all the long line, it'll take out all electric. The long lines act as essentially super antennas. It'll take out pretty much anything electrical and electronic in the affected area. Now, in EMPs are weapons-based EMPs fall into two main categories. The first is nuclear, and HEMP is one delivery. It stands for HEMP, high altitude, or a nuclear detonation above altitude. The other would be from EMP weapons, which are directional and situational, and they're non-nuclear. If a nuclear-induced EMP occurred, a HEMP, we wouldn't know anything about it. We wouldn't feel anything. There would be no nuclear or radiation danger to us. All that we would experience would be the grid going down, everything electrical going off. Okay, and it would take some time for most people to understand what had happened. As a matter of fact, that's the way that my book starts, is that, and that's probably what would happen. There would be mass confusion. People wouldn't understand why the lights were out. Most people aren't familiar with this, and like I said, even in the prepper community, it's not fully understood. So there would be confusion. Whether exactly what would be taken out is a matter of conjecture. It's anybody's guess. You can go to different studies that indicate different things, but it's all going to come down essentially to the same thing. Your car may or may not run. Some of your other electrical components may or may not run. It's unclear exactly, and anybody who says that they know exactly is a little bit misled and misleading in their information. Okay, if I look a little bit different in the frame than I did a half a second ago, we had a little mishap, and so we're taking it from there. I don't believe it was EMP based. So anyway, what I was saying is whether or not your vehicle would run, or whether it was shut off or whatever, doesn't really make any difference. All electronic dependent systems would go down, which means that if your car is still running, when you run out of gas, you're not getting any more because the gas pumps aren't running. The grid's down, the lights are off, the gas is off, the water service is either off or about to be off. Public services are gone because the police won't be responding, the fire department won't be responding, the National Guard won't be responding. Nobody will be coming to help, and this is something that's really beyond the grasp of many people. They can't imagine a situation to where there would not be some help coming, because we live in a world, we live in a country where we've become used to there always being someone coming to help. I was in law enforcement for a long time, and it's amazing when you see how dependent people are on outside help, on government help, for what you would think would be the most basic of needs, the most basic of problems that people should be able to handle on their own and can't in the kind of society that's evolved in this country. And when you extrapolate that to larger problems, the results are going to be frightening. So anyway, when we have the collapse of all those, what we now consider to be life-sustaining systems, and they shouldn't be, but because society depends so heavily on them, they have become that. You see the collapse of that. You see what we term societal collapse. No lights at night. Like I said, no police. They say that the average person has 3 days to 10 days of food in their house, and that's when you're scratching out everything in the back of the cupboard. You know what happens when a snowstorm's coming, or if you live in I don't know what it's like in a hurricane. I don't live in a hurricane area, but here in the Midwest, when a snowstorm's coming, everybody's fighting for the last loaf of bread down at the grocery store because they don't have anything at home and they've got to get that. We don't live, for the most part, in a prepared, as you know, if you're watching this, if you're interested in preparedness, you're probably well aware of how unprepared most people are. We live in a system, a just-in-time delivery system, that even the grocery stores don't stock the food that they're going to need tomorrow in their back rooms anymore like they used to. The food they're going to need tomorrow is coming on a truck tonight, and when the trucks aren't running anymore, there's no food tomorrow when today's food runs out, which it will when everybody's down there trying to get it. Within a couple of days, society will if history shows us anything, society will start to devolve drastically. You can imagine, and there are places that we can see where it's happened, how people will act when they find out that there's no law enforcement, no police, nobody to hold them to account for their actions. And then you have 90% of the people out there who are, fairly good folks, just trying to find out how they're going to get some more food to feed their kids. Well, from this collapse comes a figure that was introduced in the 2001 EMP Commission report, that they estimated a 90% die-off in the affected area of EMP or CME within the first 12 months. And within 1 year, 90%, 9 out of 10 people in this country would die from starvation, bad water, disease, violence, any number of reasons. The world is a dangerous place, and we don't realize it anymore because we've made it so safe for the average person. But the world's full of things that can kill us, and kill us very quickly and easily when we are no longer separated from them by the safety nets of our society. So when you look at that, and we have a continental population here of over 400 million, and all of a sudden in a year that's going to be taken down to 40 million. I don't know when the last time the continental population was 40 million, but it's been a long time. So anyway, that's the first phase of understanding what would happen immediately after an EMP or a CME. And the cases are that in a CME, it's worldwide. Now, why isn't any help coming? You say, well, why can't they get the electricity back on? There are approximately 2,000 major transformers in the United States spread out over 3 basic grids. We have an eastern grid, a western grid, and a Texas grid. In those grids, 2,000 major transformers bring the electricity from the production down to our houses so we can turn on our lights and VCRs. Shows you how old I am, right? DVD players, whatever it is we're using these days. And if just one of those transformers goes down now, it takes up to a year to replace it. Now that seems strange and surprising. The reason is because they're not built here in the United States anymore. They're built in Germany and Korea. And when they don't keep them laying around, now I've heard somebody say that they thought there was a couple of spares somewhere in the United States. I'm not sure that I believe it, but it doesn't really matter, because if just one went down now, it would take up to a year to get a replacement for it. And when all 2,000 are down, we're not getting 2,000 transformers replaced. Even if the whole rest of the world, even if it was just our country that experienced or under attack was an EMP, which brings on a whole host of other problems that are beyond the scope of this particular video. Even if it was just us, they're not sending 2,000 transformers here to build us back up. Okay, well, I'll save that for another one. In the case of a CME, it's lights out worldwide. There is nothing that's going to be manufacturing or enabling manufacturing of transformers until we essentially start back from the beginning and rebuild manufacturing. And that's going to take a long time. Now, I've heard people say this would knock us back to the Stone Age. It would not knock us back to the Stone Age. It would knock us back to, early 1800s, something like that. But I am going to say that's not necessarily anything to be afraid of. Now people, will say, oh, well, that's terrible. How can you possibly say that wouldn't be terrible? Well, very simple. A lot of people before the mid-1800s lived very good lives, okay, like we do nowadays. Now, a lot of them lived horrible lives, like a lot of people do nowadays, but it had a lot more to do with the type of person and the character and the culture that they lived in than it had to do with electricity. To use a couple of my favorite movies as as examples, and I don't use movies, and neither should you, to measure reality, but they do give us ways of looking at things in a way that kind of bring things into perspective. The first one that I would look at would be The Patriot with Mel Gibson. I'm sure you've seen it. Everybody's seen The Patriot. Everybody loves it. If you don't love The Patriot, I'm sure you're not watching this channel. Look at the house that they lived in. Look at the farm, the plantation that they were on. Look at the barns. Look at, there was a very nice house. That would have been a very nice farm nowadays. The only difference being the lack of electricity. Now, not everybody lived like that, certainly. I know that. But many people did. Many people did. The other movie that I use as an example is one of my favorites, McClintock with John Wayne. If you've seen that, and if you haven't, you should. Look at the house that they lived in. Okay, a beautiful house. It would be a beautiful house today. I'd love to live in it today. Again, it was before electricity. And they had good lifestyles. So this is not, it would not be kicking us back to the Stone Age. It would be kicking us back to a time pre-electricity, but certainly not a horrible life for those with some smarts and with some preparation and are willing to work and make a life out of it, just as they did back then. Now, the reason that we wouldn't be knocked back before then and would be ahead of them is because we wouldn't be losing the knowledge. We would be losing the technology, the working technology that we have now. Okay, so if I look different again, we had another little glitch. I don't know, maybe I'm not supposed to be making this one. But anyway, like I said, we would not be losing the knowledge. We would be losing the working technology of the time. But we already know now how all of these things were done. And it would be a matter of building back manufacturing. I mean, from the very beginning, it's going to be putting together steel plants and everything, and rebuilding these things from scratch physically, but not from scratch informationally or mentally. So I just kind of wanted to put those into perspective for people. And it's not that I'm making light at all of the seriousness of EMP or CME. It is the granddaddy of concerns, of threats, and it's the one that and that's why I do encourage everybody to prepare for that. But for prepared people, it's survivable. It is something that, and I've heard people, and I've heard quite a few people say, I just wish that this world's going to heck in a handbasket, and I just wish we'd have an EMP and start over again with the way that we want to start it. And I can understand what they're saying, but the suffering would be horrible. It would be beyond anything that any of us have ever witnessed, and probably beyond what we can even imagine. I when I wrote the books, and if you haven't read them, we always put the links down here below if you'd like. They're on Amazon, both of them. And I avoided, for the most part, getting into the real horrible situations that we know would happen in a collapse situation. People have written about, and I'm sure that they're right. I touch on it. Cannibalism would no doubt appear. Okay, we had another glitch. Maybe I'm not supposed to be making this one, but so I'm sorry if there's a lot of changes and jumps in this. But anyway, as I was saying, and we're just about done. I imagine that a reintroduction of slavery would occur in all of the affected areas, and I touch on that in the third book. So it's going to be it would be a horrible situation to go through. Much more horrible if you're not prepared, and it's very possible to survive it if you are. So it's like I've said, it's the biggest threat that faces us, about which most people are either unaware or misinformed. And to that, I encourage everybody, do your own. Let this just be kind of impetus for you to do your own homework, so that you don't have to just be afraid when you hear about this, but have an understanding on your own, so that when somebody asks you, why do you think that? You don't have to say, well, somebody on YouTube said that. Okay. So anyway, I wanted to put this in because I'm sure it will keep popping up. I'm glad that President Trump has put this directive out to study the situation, but it's not new. It's happened before. It'll happen again. These things pop up every now and then. And if it affects how you prepare, then you're preparing improperly, because we should always be moving forward in the direction of total self-sufficiency. And to a person who is self-sufficient, any catastrophe, even an EMP or a CME, is not going to be the catastrophe. It'll be for those who are not. So anyway, with that, I'll bring this to a close and try again not to flub my new cool sign-off line and say that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.